So when I look at my own suffering and the suffering of those around me, the cross is what roots me in knowing that, like, even if I can't make sense of the agony that I'm walking through, the cross shows me that, like, death always turns to resurrection. Darkness always turns to light.
Welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I'm very excited because today I get to introduce somebody very special to me. I have been delighted to every few weeks be able to share a different young woman's story and introduce her to you as we explore questions and different topics together. And I intentionally, I think God saved this one for last just because she's such a joy in my life and one of the most radiant people that I know. And I'm so excited that she agreed to be on the podcast this season. This is my friend Jeanine. Jeanine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Jeanine, how long have we been friends? Because I was talking to your sister about this the other day, and she was like, it amazed me that we hadn't been friends for as long as I remembered. Like, I thought that we'd been friends for a much longer period of time. So I probably will get it wrong if you tell me. So tell me.
I think it's been a little longer than a year because I met you, I want to say it was the spring of last year.
Yeah.
Does that seem accurate to you?
Yeah. So maybe close to a year and a half. Okay. But I feel like we've been friends for a very long time. And
yeah.
I imagine though, but I imagine a lot of people feel like they've been your friend for a long time. You're a very good friend. You're very thoughtful and intentional, and you follow through, just asking like heart questions. You're very tender towards people. And anyway, so I was speaking at a women's event and you and your mom were there. And I remember talking with you briefly afterwards and just thinking, I want to get to know this person. And then we went to the smoothie shop and we got to know each other and over smoothies and just visiting. And I thought, yeah, this is a kindred spirit. So
many smoothies have brought us together.
That's right. Since then, I've made quite a few.
You have. It's one of your spiritual gifts.
I know I don't cook at all, but I love smoothies.
She's a smoothie fiend.
Yeah, I don't tell people that because I don't want to make them know me. No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I really do like smoothies. That was a lie. No, I think food has brought us together. I also have a box of Trader Joe's almonds that are currently in the pantry upstairs that I try really hard not to give into temptation with. Very good. That you introduced me to. Because you and Christy gave me some for my birthday. Anyway, so good. I highly recommend. What kind? They're turbinado. Is that what it's called?
Something
turbinado?
Like that.
Turbinado, sugar,
a lot of salt. Yeah, sea salt. Yeah, the salt's what does it?
Yeah, Trader Joe's. Yeah. Who knew? Everything's good at Trader Joe's. Jeanine, I'd love for whoever's listening or watching this to know more about you and your story. And yeah, go ahead and share whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah. My story involves many years of chronic illness. And it began for me about 12 years ago now. I got pretty sick while I was traveling overseas. I was in my last year of college and was studying abroad in Costa Rica at the time. And we took a trip to Nicaragua while we were there. And I got really, really sick from some water there and was treated a lot, but just never quite recovered. And so when I came home a few months later, things just kind of continued to unravel from there. I was experiencing just a wide range of symptoms that were pretty inexplicable. We saw countless doctors and specialists kind of trying to figure out, like, what is this thing that was once just kind of like a stomach bug and now it's morphed into like a full body systemic thing that doesn't really have an explanation. And it probably took about 5 years of that kind of maddening journey of being in and out of doctors' offices and doing all kinds of testing, and to just not really have any answers. And then finally, I think it was in 2018, I got a diagnosis of like late stage chronic Lyme disease. And um, if you know anything about Lyme disease, it's a pretty complex and really difficult to treat like disease once it becomes chronic in your body. If it's caught early, often it can be treated really successfully. But they had kind of figured with me that it was something that I had maybe picked up as a kid, and then it had gone dormant in my system, and then it took like the Nicaraguan illness to sort of bring it out again. And so Lyme disease, once it becomes chronic, can cause just a full myriad of symptoms. And I think they call it like the great mimicker or the great imitator as a disease, because it can just kind of manifest as almost any sort of disease. Like there's a lot of neurological diseases like MS or Parkinson's or ALS that like they'll be diagnosed as that, but then later they'll find out it's Lyme that's causing it, or all kinds of autoimmune diseases, you name it. It just basically can kind of cause sort of widespread chaos throughout the body. So that diagnosis, when I got that in 2018, was clarifying. It kind of explained some of um, the the mystery of what the last like 5 years had been. But it was it was difficult after that diagnosis, because the treatment for Lyme, there's not a one size fits all treatment. There's hundreds of treatments out there that people are trying. Some that are helpful and some that are just wild, because it's a really hard disease to treat. Some people are able to put it into remission, but others will just kind of live with it for the rest of their lives. And so since 2018, I've just been kind of working to battle that disease with pretty little success. But my chronic illness journey kind of took a huge turn in 2021 when my Lyme doctor at the time, he was out of the office on paternity leave, and he had like a student, like a resident, filling in for him. And um, I'm not entirely sure why still to this day, but she decided to give me a manual neck adjustment. And she wasn't like trained or qualified to do that, but it was pretty violent. It went very poorly. And after that adjustment, um, my body just kind of just went like haywire. And so for the next like year and a half to 2 years after that injury, I, I was in and out of the ER about every 1 to 2 weeks with just new, unreal, like inexplicable, chaotic symptoms. So some of those, amongst many, were I had like pretty extreme and rapid weight loss. My blood pressure was like skyrocketing to really extreme levels. I was having a lot of cardiac issues. My kidneys like stopped functioning. Had a blood clot that turned into a pulmonary embolism. Um, I started losing my ability to walk, and so my parents had to like assist me around the house. I couldn't like sleep was immensely difficult. I couldn't lie down because the pressure in my skull was so extreme that lying down would kind of trigger really bad neurological symptoms. And even like the act of falling asleep itself would trigger like a panic attack in my body. So I couldn't sleep through those years, like hardly at all. Couldn't be left alone for a moment because my life was so touch and go. And was having like seizure-like symptoms, little like mini strokes. There were many times I was like rushed to see an optometrist because I would have spells where I would lose my vision. Pretty much every organ system in my body was impacted by this neck injury. And we later found out that it had kind of damaged my brainstem, which started to like make a lot of sense because the brainstem is responsible for so much in your body. And so um, it, yeah, it really made sense why for me it felt like I was just kind of hanging on for dear life. And yeah, that time was so like unbelievably traumatic that I I wished for like death. Like I would lay awake at night like begging God to take my life because I just didn't know that I could bear a moment longer of that kind of agony. So I can pause for a little bit because I've been talking a while, but um,
I just, I'm in awe of you because I know how much you give to others, and it just boggles my mind what you've been through. And you're a lot younger than me. And just in a short amount of time here on Earth, it feels like a lot of it has been in pain. Where are you now, like health wise?
yeah, thanks for asking. So I shared that it was about like a year and a half to 2 years of like being bedridden, and every day was like, I don't know if I'm gonna live, I don't know if I'm gonna die. Like it was very, I was in a like a really kind of liminal space during that time, and so miraculously, it feels like, yeah, it is a miracle that I'm alive, because my life did not seem guaranteed to me any one of those days during those 2 years. So I'm a lot more functional now, a lot more stable, which is beautiful. I can hold myself up right now. Like I'm not trapped to the bed, or needing others to be around at every moment, or afraid that I might go to the ER at any second. But I have told a lot of people this. It very much feels like I am no longer living in the same body that I had prior to that injury. For whatever reason, the injury itself triggered it triggered a lot, like I kind of shared with the ER stories, but as far as like the kind of long-term fallout from the injury, it triggered this sort of like sudden onset joint hypermobility, like connective tissue weakness picture. So my all my joints and ligaments are extremely unstable and loose now, and so um, there's not a day that goes by when it doesn't feel to some level like pretty unbearable to like just be in my body. Yeah, and so there's a deep grief and a heaviness to that, because there's gratitude on the one hand that I still get to live life and that I didn't die, but there's also the daily grief of like, this is not the body that I once had, and I don't know if there will be further healing on this side of heaven. One, my neck injury is also not healed. Like I said before, I'm able to like hold myself up right now, which is a big leap from what it was, which was like not being able to support myself before. But I still like can't turn my head left to right without like passing out or something really bad neurologically happening. And that has been a very long, ongoing journey of trying to figure out if there's any way to like bring healing to that injury, because there are a lot of ligaments that have been damaged in my cervical spine, but the one that's kind of most important of all is the one at the very top of the spine. It's at like C0 to C1, and that is a very, very delicate area neurologically. And so, so as far as treatments for me go, the options are highly risky. And so we've been pretty much trying everything we can that doesn't involve treating that specific area, to see if there's any progress that can be made prior to stepping into something that, yeah, the risks are pretty terrifying of like what would be involved to try to like stabilize that ligament. And so I very much live with this tension of like, it's unbearable to be in my body. I really long for deeper healing. And yet some of the options presented to me for healing feel almost more scary than kind of the daily reality of what I live with. And that's also true for another condition that developed after the neck injury, which is really severe, like systemic endometriosis. For most women, that condition kind of stays in their pelvic region, but for me, it's traveled like all over my body, and they're even suspecting that it's in my brain, given a lot of the symptoms that I have. And so they suspect that the brainstem injury kind of, it caused so much chaos that I think that that's what allowed just this other condition of like endometriosis to kind of blossom and spread kind of rapidly since that injury. And that as well, like there's surgery has very much been on the table for a long time, but they don't want to operate because as I mentioned, like my connective tissue is so weak, like including my skin, and so I don't really have the ability to like heal as I once did. Like even a small little wound externally takes like months to heal, and even then it doesn't really heal normally. And it's systemic, it's all over my body, so the surgery would probably be more akin to like some sort of mutilation than like a nice little uh, thing that I could kind of get through. And so all of that to say, I feel like I live very much in there's a sense of like futility and stuckness because these conditions are so severe. They can be very debilitating. They affect every moment of every day of my life, and yet it feels like there are very few options for healing. And I've tried everything I know I can do on my end, apart from what's been offered. Supplements, uh, just all kinds of supplements, all kinds of diets, all just crazy stuff. Just trying it all to see if I can make any ounce of difference. But yeah, there's very much a sense of not knowing what God's up to with a lot of these things that haven't resolved easily.
I want to ask you about God in a minute, but
Yeah.
before we get there, do you remember a time, maybe even a memory, of when you felt like good in your body, when you felt healthy?
That's a beautiful question. I have dreams still at night of running. I used to be a cross country runner, and I think to experience that feeling of like being strong in my body and being able to go far and go fast. Yeah, so I'm remembering that. Those were in my high school days, but yeah.
Well, you've been through a lot, obviously, and I know you have a faith, a strong one, but uh, no one would, I guess no one would fault you if they said, wait a second, you believe in a God who's allowed a lot of suffering in your life. Um, so tell me about your relationship with God and maybe where it was when you were younger and where it is today.
Yeah. I think loving God and following Him felt easy breezy and full of wonder and joy. Especially, again, I remember back to high school days when I just felt really passionate about following Jesus. And I was leading Bible studies at school, and like I was leading chapels and all these things. And yeah, that continued into college too. Just ministry and just really loving Jesus deeply.
Were you
And
were you a strong, sorry to interrupt you, I just want to
no
ask,
problem.
were you a strong believer your entire life? How did that come about? Where did that come from?
Yeah. I would say yes. Very much like grew up in the faith, was raised in a Christian home. Parents put us in Christian schools for most of the journey. So Jesus was, yeah, very close to me since I was quite little. I mentioned high school because I think that was probably just a time in my life when I just felt like an increased thirst for God and really felt like I was kind of like putting my faith into action more. So yeah, it's been with me pretty much my whole life, but it's definitely very much altered and changed through these last years of sickness. Very much so. Yeah, I think it's never really been an option for me to turn away from God.
Mm.
It's it's like that. Like where else would I go? I think I can't imagine walking through something like this if I didn't have any hope that one day it would all be redeemed. Even if it's not something that I get to see in this lifetime, just even the mere hope of like heaven um, has been like an increasing reality that I cling to more than I ever would have like in high school when life was going pretty good. Like heaven to me now feels like um, what I'm aiming for to be with Jesus fully. So yeah, um,
Mm.
and I think if anything, this experience has certainly tested my faith more deeply than I would have ever imagined. And so, not to say that this has not been without incredible wrestling with God, like incredible wrestling, but but I know it's also been an invitation to know Him in a way that I wouldn't have if I like didn't have a share in like tasting His sufferings. I picture Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane asking His disciples to like keep vigil with Him and stay awake, and they all fell asleep. And I know there have been so many times that I've fallen asleep on Jesus throughout my life, but I feel like the daily reality of suffering is a way that like I can stay awake. I can stay
Mm.
awake with Christ. Like it's not it's not the path that I ever would have chosen, but if it's a way that I can like bring some small like companionship to Jesus and His sufferings by staying awake with Him through mine, then I believe that that is worth it. Maybe it doesn't feel worth it today, but I believe that one day it will be.
Wow. The daily if I want to remember this correctly because it was so beautiful what you just said. The daily reality of suffering helps keep you awake.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
wow. Well, friend, your faith has been just pretty beautiful to behold.
Mm,
Just as your friend, wow, seeing you and getting to know you this past year and a half. Um, there's a radiance about you because you do look to Him, and I know that there are many days that you feel really weak. Do you ever resent Him because He has allowed the sufferings? I mean, you're a Bible believing Christian. You know that He can, and you also know that He hasn't. How do you wrestle with that tension?
mm. I wrestle with it daily to some degree or another. I don't know that I wrestle with it well. Uh, but I think, well, let me back up here. I think there's something that I've kind of held my whole life, which is I, I have to work to be loved, and work includes like being really pleasing and like really put together. And I won't like receive love unless I'm like a good, like good, you know?
Mhm.
And I think this journey has really invited me into like, is it possible? And the answer is yes, because of what scripture says, but like, is it possible to know myself as one like completely beloved, even in the like rage that I feel sometimes, or the like the doubt or the sorrow, like, is Christ able to hold and bear all of that and still like choose me and love me? And I've found that to be true, that like he showed me through the cross that like he's willing to enter the depths of my suffering, which involve not just physical suffering, but also like all the emotional, like, where are you, God? Why have you forsaken me? Like Jesus, like those were his last words on the cross. And so like he knows what it's like to feel forsaken by God. And he willingly like chose to enter that human experience that we all inevitably feel at some point in our lives. And I I often think about like the marvel of like how unbearable it feels for like me personally to kind of like inhabit my body every day. Like I just tell God like this is so hard, like this is brutal. But then I'm reminded like, well, my body is also like a temple for the spirit, and like the spirit has chosen to dwell in me still, and to feel like he's feeling everything that I feel, all the suffering, all the anguish, and he's still choosing to like dwell and inhabit this temple. And so like if he can remain with me in this, then like can I remain with him and with my own self through the suffering? I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, you did. I,
um,
I guess another follow-up question to all that is, do you still have hopes and dreams for this world?
mm, mm, it's a sweet question. I do. Um, I think I know in scripture he tells us that like hope does not put us to shame, and so I cling to that because I do have a lot of hopes for this world that I have yet to see come to pass. And so as much as I wrestle with Jesus, I also wrestle with the concept of hope. And I think Dan Allender says that hope is what you bleed for. Like hope is not a like fluffy, like airy fairy thing. Like it's something you wrestle with deeply. It's what you bleed for. And so um, I think I'm constantly like negotiating with my own hopes for the future in this life, and asking like, and even if he doesn't answer any one of these prayers, like, am I content with my hope resting like solely in relationship with him, which is what he is choosing to offer me like every single day. um, and I don't know that I can like honestly say like yes 100% of the time, because a lot of the desires I have for this world are very strong. I've always envisioned myself like being a mom, and because of the way my body works, like I don't know if that'll ever happen. I don't know if I'll get the chance to like be married and be in partnership with someone, which is also another really deep desire. And I don't I the deep desire is just full complete healing in this life, and again the answer is I don't know. Um so yeah, I think I wrestle deeply with hope. And where am I placing it, and also knowing that like it's okay to desire too, because I think he created us to be creatures that desire and dream. And so
Yeah.
um continuing to like bring that to him, knowing that it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We were just talking to some teenagers on Sunday morning about Jesus's first miracle, turning the water into wine,
Mm-hmm.
and about
Mm-hmm.
how he really cares about the little things,
Mm-hmm.
and the big things.
Mm-hmm.
And he cares about the things here on earth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I know I've shared with you before, and I'm sure I've shared on this podcast many times, but I went to a church service one time where the pastor just got up there and said something along the lines of, "Most of you are here, you don't want to be here." It was a prayer for for a family. We're struggling with infertility, and he just said, there's this story in the Bible of this man who was paralyzed, and his friends so desperately wanted him to receive healing that they carried him on a mat and they carried him up the stairs of the house that Jesus was preaching at. The house was super crowded. They couldn't get to Jesus. So they go upstairs onto the roof and they cut a hole in the roof and they lower their friend to Jesus. And he said in the Bible, nowhere does it say that Jesus saw the faith of the man and he healed the man, which was actually unique. If you look in scripture, a lot of times Jesus is saying to the person, I see your faith and I'm healing you. He actually says to the friends, I see the faith of your friends and I'm healing the man. And so I just, even as people are hearing your story right now, I just want to ask people that love the Lord to stop and say a prayer for my friend Jeanine here. And because I'll never forget that pastor that day. He said, we're here to be those friends for you. Because maybe you've stopped dreaming or hoping. But it's hard. It's hard to hope for things that you can't see and not know whether they're going to be fulfilled. And anyway, I really admire you, Jeanine, and I hope it's come across already in our conversation here. But I know, like, I had you fill out this co-host form that I have everyone fill out, and um, it you did write down in here. You marked off someone who is looking for restoration or hope, someone who doesn't know where she belongs, someone who feels solid in her personal convictions about faith, who has had a personal crisis of faith, and who has put her trust in Jesus. A lot of people wouldn't understand how those things all go together. And I'm really glad that you're here to bring a voice to the fact that there's wrestling. So would you want to speak a little bit to that? Someone who's not sure where she belongs and is looking for restoration and hope.
Yeah, I think that question of belonging is very present. A lot of that has to do with just the expectations I had for my life. Sure, to be someplace different. By now, I'm in my early 30s, and I just envisioned life being a lot different. And there are a lot of ways that my life feels very confined by illness, and very like dictated by it. And so there's a deep sense of kind of like isolation and loneliness that comes because I can't be out doing everything I would want to normally be doing. And so I also think I used to associate like I'm being like the best Christian I can be when I'm out like serving Jesus, and doing all these good things for other people. And there's a lot of limitation that I experience now. And so I don't get to like pat myself on the shoulder anymore and be like, good job, like you're out there serving.
You're in the game.
Right. Yeah, you're not on the sidelines, like you're in the game. And so there is a sense of like my life having been sidelined for 12 years now. But I mean, I'm thinking of the Sermon on the Mount, like Jesus turns everything on its head. Like it's the upside down kingdom, right? And so, like I have to believe that like God is a big enough God that he can hold the entirety of like human experience. And there are people for whatever reason who like they can't be out there serving. There are people who are stuck in bed, and like, can it be true that the person who's bedridden or who can't get out of bed because they're so depressed or whatever else like is equally precious to God? I mean, he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And so I don't know where I'm going with this. I think it was back to the question of belonging. Like,
no,
I wrestle with like, is my story like good enough to kind of fit into what I thought like a good Christian life would look like? And I think it's it's taken a lot of wrestling and a lot of time to be like, he he still calls this little life like beloved. um yeah.
It sounds like you recognize the truth found in scripture that your life has tremendous value. Blessed are
Mm-hmm.
those,
Mm-hmm.
who who mourn and all these different things. But
Mm-hmm.
like there's another current, right, of culture that says
Yeah,
get in the
sure.
game, and then also maybe even Christian culture that says,
Yeah.
get in there and do. Well, you have no choice but to rest in the done.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you, even though you were able to just articulate the truth of, that, right, the resting and just trusting him is plenty. How much headspace and energy do you spend wrestling with thoughts like that, would you say?
With thoughts like,
With thoughts of you should be doing more, or why is this, this feels like it's not enough, or this doesn't feel like, I should be out there grinding. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I think it's, yeah, I think I spend more time than I should on that. I think there are there are times when I'm more in like survival mode, like trying to recover from some treatment that went really poorly, or just, yeah, life feels very chaotic in a lot of ways still. So there are times when I feel like I'm more in just thinking through, oh my gosh, like what am I supposed to do now that I'm feel like I'm set back a million light years again, physically or whatever. I think what I'm trying to say is I guess it depends on where I'm at, what
Mhm.
season I'm in, with whether how much I'm kind of giving some airtime to those feelings of, I guess, inadequacy. Yeah, I think when I'm more in like this kind of realm of survival mode, my thoughts are much more centered on like on surviving, I guess.
Yeah,
Which, yeah.
yeah. I think it does bring up a really good question, though, about the language we put to what it means
Mm-hmm.
to be a strong Christian, and what
Yeah.
that looks like, and what we value as a Western culture, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay. We talked about the other things, except someone who's had a personal crisis of faith. You didn't talk too much about that, but
Mm-hmm.
um, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Some one part of my journey that I didn't speak to as much was, I, after getting sick in 2013 in, Nicaragua, I came back to the States and was finishing out my last, semester of college, and I was on a, like spiritual retreat through my school there, and, probably take too much time to go into the details of it, but I had a pretty like, I guess I don't know how to describe it. So I'll try to make it brief, but just like a pretty traumatic spiritual experience. And that left me feeling very abandoned by God, which was something I could have never like prepared for, that, like that feeling. Because I just didn't know it was possible to feel that way because I had followed Jesus closely my whole life. And so there were that kind of these like two parallel tracks running, between the physical like Lyme disease journey, and then at the same time really deep, like I guess I'd categorize it as like a pretty intense like dark night of the soul, where God's sense of presence just seemed nowhere to be found. And I can look back my journals over those years where I'm just kind of like pouring out my heart to God, being like, I don't even know if you're there, I don't even know if you're listening. And I want to say that was like 8 or 9 years. And I don't really know what it was that kind of shifted me out of that place of feeling like I was very much in a crisis of faith. Like, again, I never turned my back on God or was like, I'm going to walk away from you. But I felt like I was like crying out into a void basically for
Mm-hmm.
those 8 to 9 years. Um, and I remember telling my mom at one point, like, I would, I would trade like I would take on any physical suffering at this point. I'd much rather go through that than go through the like this feeling of like my precious like beloved savior being like I just he feels so absent, and this is more devastating to my soul than like anything I'm experiencing physically right now. Like I can't bear this feeling of his absence. And I really like genuinely felt that like I'll take on anything physically like if I could just kind of have that sense of God's presence back, because this is just devastating to me. And I don't really know what it was that kind of shifted me out of that space, because that was very dark for very many years. But it did kind of happen around the same time as the neck injury, when I was fighting for my life. And I, there was just, there was something about, like I remember nights awake just feeling like I was on my way out, and I would just hear this tiny little whisper where he would just say like, oh child, like, oh child, I love you. And that was, I think that was just the beginning of like my heart kind of turning back towards like, he hasn't left me, like he's still here. And and I think there was a component to kind of walking that line so closely between life and death that I feel like this kind of veil dropped a little bit, where I just felt a lot more close to, I don't know, like the realities of heaven. Like I'm thinking of a movie that I saw once where there's this girl who's, I think she's got tuberculosis or something, and she says, she's dying, but she says like, the sicker I become, the more I can see how everything's connected by light. And there was something about that that really resonated with my experience. Like those days of like, I don't know if I'm gonna live or die. Like there was this kind of way that my senses felt like they were stronger. And even now, as I say that, I'm like, I know I'm not in that place right now. Like I know that it's feels kind of harder to access his presence, because I'm not in such an acute place. But I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I kind of rambled, but
no, it was wonderful. Okay, we talked a lot about those. I just want to get to some of your questions here. I'll just read what you wrote, and then we can go off of anything here. I asked, what are some questions or doubts you may have about Christianity or belief in general? And you said, I think I have a lot of questions, obviously, about healing. Why does he heal sometimes? And why do prayers for healing seemingly go unanswered? Why do some people seem to to see, hear, or feel God so much more, and others who really yearn to experience more of his spirit feel like they cannot sense or hear him? How do I hold things that Jesus said, like about how he came that we may have life and life abundantly? Or which of you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? I think that's found in Matthew chapter 22. Is that right? Somewhere along there.
I'm not the
It's in
right
the
person to
Bible.
consult.
It's in the Bible. How
It's somewhere.
you quoted scripture there. How do I hold beautiful promises like this alongside a life story where I feel like I have pleaded with him for good gifts and longed deeply for abundant life, yet feel like most of my life is spent pretty much living in survival mode and unanswered prayer? I love him and I trust him that somehow he is still working good, but I don't understand his ways so much of the time. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I've nailed it. I've figured it all out now. I've got all the answers. You know, I wrote that a couple months ago, so I'm just here to tell you that I've hacked it. I figured it out.
Okay. Moving along. You
Life
found
is
something
great.
real. It's all done.
Yeah.
No.
So you said, do I have anything more to say about that?
Yeah.
I guess what comes to mind is, I think it's Tyler Staton, he's a pastor at a church in Portland. He talks about like how with our pain and suffering, God often deals with it by either like removing it, so that would involve like the miraculous healing ministry of Jesus, or redeeming it, so like removing or redeeming. Um and that's not to like put a little neat bow on everything that I wrote that you just read. But I think that framework has been helpful for me, because he talks about like how the greatest, we think about Jesus's life and his like miraculous healing ministry, but ultimately he says like, well, the greatest miracle of healing, like the most far-reaching display of Jesus's power, came not through some like miraculous sign, but rather, and like not through Jesus evading suffering, but rather by him choosing it. And so like our greatest source of healing came through Jesus kind of like entering almost like the powerlessness of like submitting to the cross. And so that doesn't answer all my questions, but it brings some measure of comfort to like, okay, so if like the worst possible thing we could imagine, which is like the crucifixion of the Son of God, turned out to be the deepest, like to bring and unleash the deepest sort of healing known to mankind, then that brings some assurance to me that like all of all of our tragedies and all of our pain like follow that same model of like death to resurrection. Like he's always bringing life out of death. And I think for me it's been hard because it feels like it's been a lot of death, a lot of deaths, a lot of losses for a very long time, and very little like resurrection. But at the same time, like, you know, I picture like a seed being buried in the dirt, and like eventually it sprouts. We don't really know how long it's going to be in there, you know, like, but there is a time that it bursts forth. And it's, I think it's like John, is it John 12:24 or something, like, unless the kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains just a single seed, but if it dies, like, it produces much fruit. Mm-hmm. So I try to remind God regularly, like, God, it seems like there's been a lot of death in my life, you know, like waiting for that fruit. And I also like hold, I hold that like my vision is very limited. And so I'm not, I think I'm far more, because I like live in chronic pain, I think I'm far more oriented towards like awareness of like what isn't changing yet, and like what's not happening, like, you know, what does feel grievous and like full of loss, that like I'm aware of my own self, that it's probably harder for me to see like all the little ways that he's still bringing resurrection and goodness. I think sometimes I just long for that goodness to feel like heavier and weightier than the suffering does. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It did. It did. Well, we're definitely going to have to talk about some of this stuff with some guests that we have on the podcast throughout the year. But I thought that you also had a really good response here. I love your writing, Jeanine. By the way, for those listening, Janine's an excellent writer too. You're very thoughtful. And here's what you said in response to the question: has the Christian church negatively impacted you? So please explain. You said, I think I felt shame for having doubts or for being someone who struggles with chronic illness. I don't think the church or Christians typically tend to know what to do with stories that aren't neatly resolved. Like, it seems like I should just be able to name and claim my healing. So I think I felt shame, like there must be something wrong with me that I haven't been healed yet. I've also been told by those in the church I'm not personally able to hear from God, like there's some deficit in my ability to hear from him, which has been pretty wounding. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think some of my experience has involved like well-meaning Christians trying to like find answer. You know, I think of Job, like the story of Job, where like his friends are like, they're trying to like come up with any sort of reason for like why is Job suffering, and it's all well-meaning, and it's all like rooted in like this is so ridiculous that like we need to like put some sort of like category on this, or else like the lack of understanding is just gonna like eat us alive. And so I think we all try to like understand suffering that feels inexplicable. And we're used to watching movies that have like a nice little ending and things just wrapping up. And so all of that to say, I think there have been people who have tried to like figure out why I haven't been healed yet. And some of that has brought shame, because we have entered a lot of spaces where there's been like really a lot more like intentional prayer for healing. And I think I've walked away with like, what did I do wrong to like not get that healing, so to speak? And or like, yeah, like almost just that sense of like, do you not like maybe you don't have enough faith, or maybe you're not like holy enough, or like doing enough, or like you're not naming it and claiming it enough, or just, I keep using the word enough, and I guess that's some of the essence of what I felt is there's something wrong with me that's preventing Jesus from healing me, basically. Yeah, and that's not been true across the board. I think of you as somebody who has like walked so faithfully with me through suffering, and there's so many other people that I know who have just stepped into that and stepped into the mystery right alongside me, and who continue to like carry hope, but who also like just ache for how long this has been. And so I think the closest that I've felt like God's comfort is like in friendships like yours, where people are able to hold both the hope for healing, and like not give up on that, but also like shoulder the grief alongside me.
I think watching suffering, it's one of the hardest things that we go through. And not just, obviously the suffering itself is harder, but I think it baffles our minds, because as humans, we do want to know the why. Like, why? Why? And it's such a human thing, when there's a shooting, why was that person motivated to do that? When you think of what happened in Nazi Germany, why? We're constantly after the mind, we're people that think and process, and we're collectively like struggling. We always want absolutes when really there is a lot of mystery. But I think suffering is actually a huge evidence of a creator. For someone listening right now who's not a believer, because there's a reason it feels wrong. There's a reason it feels wrong. The fact that a beautiful young woman like yourself would spend 12 years of her life, maybe more, feeling like death is upon her, all the time, and not even know if she's going to make it from one moment to the next. Like, that's not as it should be. It's not as it should be. And our hope is in a God who will restore all things, who will make things right, whose mercy for those who have called upon his name will extend to the place of, like, there will be no more tears or sorrow or suffering for those who are in his presence forever. And I yearn for that for you, but in the meantime, I want you here, and I want to see you here, rejoicing and being glad, and, running again. And when you were talking about running, I was thinking, man, you're going to be like, I'm sure you've thought of it too, like one day we all will get to run into the arms of our Savior, because no matter when we leave this earth, Lord willing, we are getting new bodies, and we'll be able to do that. But right now it's the here and now. We live in this fallen world where, the fact that it's not as it should be is exactly why those friends carried their friend on the mat to Jesus. And it's exactly why people like me and people who are watching this or listening are thinking, yeah, it's not, there's a heaviness to that.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in God, what do you do with that? I
Yeah.
mean, what? That just sucks. Like
Yeah.
whatever, Actually, like wrestling with Him, as it shows us throughout Scripture, is part of the deal. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really glad you came on here, Jeanine. What inspired you to come? I know I asked you, and I was pleasantly and happily surprised when you were like, yeah. Um, but what do you hope to get from this, or what made you decide to come on?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I just hope that, like, for whoever is listening who is maybe coming in with questions or like long term suffering, just that they know that they're not alone, and that yeah, that Jesus is so tender and so near to like the brokenhearted and the crushed in spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. Final question.
Mm-hmm.
Ask it. Although I think I might have forgotten one time this season already. The Finding Something Real podcast is about finding restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love in Jesus, right? Authenticity, wait, I'm sorry, restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. Which of those four things stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why?
Hmm. They all do. I think I'd probably go with restoration though, just because I just think of I'm not great at scripture references, okay, but I know it's in Joel where he talks about restoring the years that the locusts have eaten, and I cling to that promise of like he is a restorer, and that's who he says he is, and um, so yeah, that's why I'm part of why I'm still here. Like I just, for all that seems senseless about suffering, like he promises to redeem. And I think Joseph's story is coming to mind too, where he tells his brothers like, what you meant for evil, God turned for good and for like the saving of many lives. And so he just shows himself to be that kind of God. So restoration is very much what I cling to, even when I can't always see it.
Yeah. Well, Jeanine, I'm excited to podcast with you this season. I'm so
Mm.
grateful you're here, and for the same reason that you're looking forward to these conversations, I know that there's others who will watch this or listen and not feel as alone.
Mm.
And Lord willing, they'll find something deeper and more real with Jesus. So thank you. And
Absolutely.
until next time.